Modern culture is hitting a turning point where entitlement meets a world that simply doesn't bend. And some people, especially those who built their identity on constant validation, are learning the hard way that the world doesn't owe them special treatment. There's a cultural shift unfolding right in front of us. For years, social media rewarded loudness over accountability, performance over substance, and curated personas over reality. But lately, something different is happening. Reality is pushing back, and the impact is impossible to ignore. You see it in public spaces first. Someone sets up a tripod in the middle of a crowded gym, demanding everyone move around their camera like extras in their personal movie. Someone else expects free meals, free service, or free attention simply because they have a platform. But more people are saying no. They walk through the shot, they refuse the comped bill, they carry on with their day, and suddenly the world isn't revolving the way it used to. The discomfort that follows isn't oppression, it's adjustment. Because the truth is simple, personal convenience isn't a public obligation. This adjustment shows up in dating too. On one side, people list demands like job titles, income minimums, lifestyle perks. On the other, they claim that being present is all they should have to offer. But when reality answers back, when someone declines a date, doesn't chase, or simply chooses higher standards, it's labeled disrespect instead of difference. Social media amplifies the disconnect. Filters replace authenticity. Curated personas replace real self-worth. And when real life doesn't react the way the online world does, when strangers don't applaud, admire, or accommodate, the reaction can be explosive. Not because reality is unfair, but because expectations were unrealistic. What we're witnessing isn't a war between men and women. It's the universal consequences of entitlement hitting the immovable force of reality. The people who thrived on attention, leniency, and special exceptions are discovering those currencies don't hold up outside comment sections. But here's the opportunity. This shift isn't punishment, it's recalibration. The world is rewarding merit again. Accountability is becoming valued again. Authentic confidence is rising while performative confidence fades. The message is clear. Special treatment isn't guaranteed, but value, real, earned value, is. And those who learn that now will thrive in the world that's coming. Part 1. The collision with reality. There's a quiet revolution happening, not in politics, not in boardrooms, but in everyday life, in gyms, coffee shops, offices, and on dates. A slow, steady correction. For years, a certain narrative dominated. You're special just for existing. Your feelings are the highest authority. If you're uncomfortable, the world must adjust. And for a while, it seemed to work. Social media rewarded outrage, victimhood, and main character energy. Every minor inconvenience could be turned into content. Every no could be framed as oppression. But here's the twist. The real world doesn't play by those rules. It never did. Take the gym example. Someone sets up a tripod in a crowded area, ring light blazing, acting like they rented the building. People walking through the shot? Rude? A guy continuing his set behind them? Disrespectful. But the truth is brutally simple. It's a public gym, not a personal stage. Other people are not paid background actors in anyone's fitness montage. And slowly, people are stopping the automatic accommodation. They're no longer rearranging their workouts, their schedules, or their lives just to avoid upsetting someone who thinks their recording session is more important than everyone else's time. That refusal is not cruelty. It's balance returning. Dating is another battlefield where this shift is obvious. For a long time, it was trendy to treat relationships like a luxury shopping list. He must earn six figures. He must be tall, fit, emotionally available, ambitious, generous, but also endlessly patient with my chaos. He must provide everything, but asking what she brings to the table is suddenly offensive. This worked as long as there were enough men willing to overextend themselves for a chance at approval. But men are comparing notes now. They're learning from each other's failures, horror stories, and expensive lessons. And increasingly, they're walking away from one-sided deals. When a man decides not to tolerate entitlement, it's labeled fragility. When he enforces boundaries, it's called misogyny. When he refuses to be used for free dinners, free attention, or free validation, he's suddenly the villain. But from his perspective, he's simply doing what women have been told to do for years: know your worth and stop settling. Here's the uncomfortable truth: the same culture that told women, you deserve everything, forgot to mention the second half of the equation: if you offer something of equal value in return. Part 2: The Identity Crisis of Entitlement. The next stage of this cultural shift is harder to watch because it's not happening in public spaces. It's happening inside people's self-image. When someone has spent years believing they deserve special treatment simply for showing up, the moment the world stops catering to them feels like an attack. Not a correction, not a reality check, an attack. And that's where the identity crisis begins. For a long time, attention came easily: likes, comments, compliments, free drinks, endless validation. Many women didn't realize it wasn't about them as individuals. It was about youth, novelty, and abundance. They mistook attention for value. They thought admiration was entitlement, and they built their confidence on a foundation that couldn't last: external approval. But attention is a currency with a short expiration date. And when the source dries up, the crash is devastating. You see it in the overreaction to ordinary interactions. A man walking past without acknowledging them? Rude. A coworker not complimenting a new hairstyle? Jealous. A stranger not flirting back? Misogynistic. Every neutral event becomes an insult because the loss of attention feels like a personal failure. Gym culture is full of this tension. A woman wearing her boldest outfit, positioned right in the center of foot traffic, expects a certain response: looks, admiration, maybe a bit of harmless ego boost. But when men ignore her, when they go about their workout without noticing, the reaction isn't relief, it's irritation, because indifference hits harder than rejection. On the flip side, if a man does look, even briefly, he's now a creep. The same behavior is condemned or desired depending entirely on who delivers it. This is not about safety or respect. It's about control over attention. And when control slips, frustration erupts. Social media makes this collapse even sharper. Online, filters and angles create a version of themselves that gets praised. Offline, the response is different: less enthusiastic, more honest. Some women react to this discrepancy not with self-reflection, but with outrage. When their curated persona meets unfiltered reality, they blame others for not seeing their worth, instead of acknowledging the distortion. But the most painful identity crisis shows up in dating. For years, certain women were told they could wait forever, that high-value men would always chase them, always compete for them, always prioritize them, that they could reject good men endlessly and still be rewarded later with better ones. But the world is changing. Men are choosing peace over chaos, effort over drama, partnership over entitlement. And suddenly, the women who once held all the cards are shocked to find the deck has been reshuffled. When a man they once dismissed dates someone younger or more grounded, they call him shallow. When a man stops chasing, they call him weak. When a man prefers a simpler relationship, they accuse him of being intimidated. Anything to avoid acknowledging the truth. The leverage they thought was permanent was actually rented. Part 2 is about realization, painful realization, that attention was never unconditional, that entitlement was never sustainable, that the world doesn't bend to ego. An identity built on external validation collapses the moment the validation disappears. Reality isn't cruel, it's consistent. And that consistency is beginning to expose every illusion people once held about their own importance. Part 3: The Consequences of a World That Stopped Bending. As this cultural shift accelerates, the consequences are becoming unavoidable. Not because the world suddenly turned harsh, but because the illusions many people lived under are dissolving. And when illusions die, reality feels like punishment, even when it's simply neutral. One of the clearest consequences is the rise of public meltdowns. Videos of adults screaming at baristas over oat milk, threatening employees over store policies, or calling the police because someone dared to say no are everywhere. These tantrums aren't random. They're withdrawal symptoms. For years, certain individuals were rewarded for outrage. They were told their feelings mattered more than rules, facts, or other people. They learned that strong emotional reactions produced results. But now, they produce eye rolls, boundaries, and consequences. Companies, restaurants, gyms, they're done tolerating emotional volatility. Staff aren't caving anymore. Managers aren't bending policies. Security guards aren't rushing to defend theatrics. And when people accustomed to special treatment hit that wall, the meltdown begins. Because when the world stops saying yes, people who were never told no don't know how to function. Another consequence is unfolding quietly in the workplace. Entitlement once masked itself as empowerment. I deserve special consideration. I shouldn't have to follow the same rules. I'm owed opportunities others must earn. But workplaces are recalibrating. Many organizations are rediscovering what actually keeps a business alive: competence, reliability, accountability. Not outrage immunity, not performative empowerment, not emotional volatility disguised as passion. Managers are taking notice. Promotions are going to those who perform, not those who protest. Deadlines don't adjust for someone's personal drama. Effort matters again. And people who coasted on identity-based privileges or social media-level confidence are finding themselves exposed. When their performance doesn't match their self-perception, the blame reflex activates. It's discrimination. It's a hostile environment. They're threatened by me. Anything to avoid acknowledging the truth. The real world runs on merit, not feelings. But perhaps the most profound consequence is happening in dating. Men, particularly younger men, are opting out. They're not bitter. They're not hateful. They're strategic. They've seen their fathers get destroyed in divorce court. They've watched friends get falsely accused. They've observed the selective enforcement of social rules. They've been told that male attention is both worthless and manipulative, that masculinity is both desired and toxic. So they're choosing differently. Many men now avoid approaching at the gym, speaking at work, or engaging strangers in public, not out of fear, but out of rational risk assessment. Why risk being labeled creepy for a glance? Why initiate conversation if it can be twisted into harassment? Why offer help when help can be interpreted as ulterior motives? This isn't cowardice, it's cost-benefit clarity. And the women who once relied on endless male pursuit are stunned when the attention dries up. They accuse men of becoming weak, shy, or socially inept. But the truth is simpler. Men are tired of being punished for participating. Part 3 is about consequences. Natural, predictable, unavoidable consequences. When entitlement is rewarded, it grows. When it's confronted, it collapses. Part 4, the collapse of the performative persona. As the reality shift deepens, something even more telling is happening beneath the surface. It's not as loud as the public meltdowns or as visible as the dating imbalance. It's quieter, more psychological, and far more revealing. The persona collapse. For years, many people curated online identities that had little connection to who they were offline. Entire personalities were built around affirmation. Glamorous selfies, inspirational captions, victim narratives, vague stories of overcoming, and endless declarations of confidence. These personas weren't just masks. They became emotional life support systems. They told a story the real world didn't validate, but the digital world rewarded. But now the algorithms are changing. Social media platforms are shifting away from outrage, thirst traps, and attention bait. Engagement that once came effortlessly, thousands of likes, floods of comments, endless validation, has sharply declined. And when the digital applause stops, the collapse begins. Suddenly, the people who posted daily affirmations about being unbothered queens are posting confused rants about feeling unseen. Those who built their identity on being admired are questioning why the admiration isn't coming. And the women who shaped their entire self-worth around external praise are realizing how fragile that foundation always was. When validation disappears, insecurity surfaces. You can see this in their reactions when confronted with unfiltered truth. Someone posts a highly edited photo claiming empowerment. Then a candid image emerges, No filters, no posing, no angles. The difference is stark. Instead of self-reflection, the response is rage. Accusations of harassment, attempts to get the poster banned, not because of malice, but because the persona cannot survive reality. This fragility also shows up in relationships. A woman who insists she's a goddess among mortals online crumbles when a man she likes doesn't pursue her. One who posts about being too good for average men shatters when the high-value men she wants choose stability over chaos. Someone who spent years rejecting good partners now panics when the same partners no longer want her. These reactions aren't rooted in cruelty, they're rooted in identity collapse. The persona they built online was never designed to withstand rejection or neutrality. It was built for applause, not accountability. And here's the deeper truth. When attention was guaranteed, self-improvement didn't feel necessary. When praise was automatic, humility felt optional. Part 5. The Failure of Accountability Avoidance. As this cultural recalibration continues, a deeper truth begins to surface, one that cuts straight through the noise, the outrage, and the theatrics. It's the truth about accountability and how avoiding it for too long always leads to the same destination: consequences. For years, certain behaviors were protected by emotional framing. Any criticism was reframed as hate. Any request for responsibility was labeled oppression. Any attempt at boundaries was met with accusations, deflection, or victimhood. But the era of automatic sympathy is fading, and with it, the shield that once protected accountability-avoidant behavior. One of the most striking examples is the growing gap between self-perception and actual contribution. Many people were raised on messaging that emphasized inherent worth but ignored earned value. They were told they were exceptional just for existing, not for what they built, learned, or accomplished. That mindset works for a while, especially in youth, when attention is abundant and consequences are minimal. But adulthood exposes the flaw brutally. Jobs reward competence, not charisma. Relationships reward character, not attitude. Friendships reward reliability, not drama. And life itself rewards effort, not entitlement. This is where the accountability gap becomes painfully obvious. Someone complains about being passed over for a promotion, but shows up late, misses deadlines, and avoids responsibility. Someone insists they're surrounded by toxic men, but dismisses, insults, or uses every man who tries to connect genuinely. Someone claims the world is unfair, but never reflects on their own patterns, decisions, or shortcomings. The world isn't punishing them. It's simply no longer protecting them from the outcomes of their choices. This backlash isn't coming from men alone. It's coming from women too. More women are calling out their peers for double standards, emotional manipulation, and selective accountability. They're tired of cleaning up the mess left behind by those who weaponize tears and tantrums. They're tired of being lumped together with behavior they themselves reject. The phrase, "not all women are like that," is now being said by women more than anyone else, because they've seen firsthand how entitlement ruins relationships, workplaces, and reputations. Yet the most significant accountability crisis appears in dating. For years, some women operated with an inflated sense of romantic market value, believing they could secure high-value men simply because they wanted them, that they deserved top-quality partners regardless of their own habits, mindset, or maturity. When those men don't choose them, the blame is placed everywhere except where it belongs. He can't handle a strong woman. He's intimidated. He's shallow. But deep down, the discomfort isn't about rejection. It's about accountability. Because acknowledging that someone didn't choose you forces a harder question. Why? And many don't want the honest answer. Part 5 is the heart of the cultural shift, the unavoidable return of accountability. When excuses stop working, when society stops cushioning bad behavior, when sympathy dries up, the truth becomes unavoidable. The world is no longer buying the narrative that adulthood should come with guaranteed validation, emotional immunity, or special rules. Avoid accountability long enough, and life becomes a series of unfair outcomes. Embrace it, and those same outcomes become opportunities to grow, improve, and evolve. and that's where this cultural story really begins to change. Part 6. When consequences replace comfort. As this cultural shift unfolds, we're reaching the phase where the consequences can no longer be ignored, spun, or emotionally bypassed. The world is no longer cushioning irresponsible behavior, and the people who relied on leniency, especially those convinced that special treatment was a permanent right, are finding themselves face to face with a reality that doesn't negotiate. For years, certain narratives encouraged avoidance of discomfort. Everything difficult was framed as toxic. Every challenge was labeled oppression. Every expectation was an attack on self-worth. But adulthood has a different rule book. Bills arrive whether you feel motivated or not. Jobs expect performance whether you're in the mood or not. Dating requires reciprocity whether you feel entitled or not. Life doesn't pause for your feelings, and it's becoming painfully clear. This phase is where many modern women who were raised on constant validation begin to feel the ground shifting beneath them. Not because they're incapable, but because they were never taught to operate without external support. Many were told, "You deserve it all. You should never struggle. You're owed the best." But they weren't told the most important part: you must earn the things you expect. When reality starts delivering equal expectations instead of special treatment, panic sets in. The same confidence that looked unshakable on social media suddenly wavers in real life. The bravado fades. The slogans don't help. Empowerment quotes stop working. Because empowerment without responsibility is just decoration. You see this most clearly in independence. Many women claimed they were strong and independent, but often relied on partners, parents, or social systems to handle the hardest parts of adulthood. When that backup disappears through breakups, aging parents, or financial strain, the collapse is immediate and overwhelming. Basic tasks like budgeting, maintaining a home, planning for the future, or managing conflict feel impossible because they were never practiced, not out of malice, but because the world used to carry the weight for them: men, family, institutions, or society itself. But that safety net is thinning, and without it, the consequences of unpreparedness hit with brutal clarity. Another area where consequences are showing up is long-term dating and marriage prospects. Many women were told they could delay commitment indefinitely and still secure the ideal partner later. But biological realities, shifting male priorities, and increased competition mean that options change, sometimes drastically. Not because women lose value with age, but because expectations, responsibilities, and compatibility shift as life becomes more complex. The women who handled their 20s recklessly, burning bridges, rejecting good men, and prioritizing attention over depth, are the ones feeling this shift the hardest, not because they're unlovable, but because the lifestyle they chose carried consequences they were never warned about. Part 6 is about the moment when comfort is replaced by clarity. When the world stops making exceptions, when effort becomes the currency of survival and success, it's not punishment, it's balance returning. And while the adjustment is painful for those who relied on special treatment, it's also the beginning of genuine empowerment. Because once consequences land, responsibility becomes unavoidable. And responsibility is the foundation of real strength, not the performative kind taught by social media, but the type built through action, discipline, and self-awareness. This isn't the end, it's the turning point. Part 7. The revelation of true value. By this stage in the cultural shift, something profound begins to happen, something quieter than outrage, deeper than dating frustration, and more meaningful than workplace correction. It's the moment when people who built their lives on entitlement finally begin to see, often painfully, what true value actually looks like. For years, many modern women were told their value was automatic, rooted in existence rather than effort, in desirability rather than character, in attention rather than substance. Social media amplified this illusion, feeding the belief that confidence could be manufactured, worth could be declared, and results could be demanded rather than earned. But now, with society pivoting back toward merit, the truth is becoming unavoidable. Value is no longer assumed. It must be demonstrated. And this realization hits hardest when the people around them, men, women, co-workers, friends, begin making choices based on actual substance, not theatrics. The shift is subtle at first. A friend group stops enabling dramatic behavior. A partner refuses to tolerate emotional outbursts. A manager holds someone accountable instead of overlooking mistakes. A date chooses someone stable over someone exciting. These moments feel like betrayal to those used to exception-based treatment. But they're not betrayal. They're reality reclaiming its territory. This phase reveals a harsh but necessary truth. When you've never had to prove your value, discovering you must suddenly feels like injustice. The revelation becomes most apparent in emotional maturity. People who relied on emotional manipulation, silent treatment, vague accusations, strategic tears, find that those tactics no longer produce results. The world has grown less responsive to emotional theatrics and more responsive to emotional intelligence. Authentic vulnerability is respected. Manufactured victimhood is not. This is where the real transformation begins. When the attention fades, the excuses crumble, and the special treatment ends, what remains? Skills, character, emotional stability, accountability. These are the traits that create long-lasting relationships, successful careers, and meaningful lives. And for some, this is the first time they've ever been asked to cultivate them. But here's the hopeful part. True value can be built. It's not tied to youth, beauty, or temporary social advantage. It's tied to discipline, humility, growth, and contribution. The women willing to embrace this reality are thriving. They're learning financial literacy, mastering emotional regulation, building careers, nurturing healthy partnerships, and rediscovering the strength that comes from self-reliance rather than external validation. The women resisting this shift, the ones clinging to entitlement as if it's a birthright, are the ones suffering most. Not because the world is unjust, but because the world has stopped rewarding performance without substance. Part 7 marks the turning point where the illusion of inherent value fades and the importance of earned value rises. It's the moment when entitlement cracks open, and underneath, the potential for real strength finally becomes visible. This is where the story stops being about loss and starts being about transformation. Conclusion: the era of entitlement is ending. This entire cultural shift, from public meltdowns to dating recalibration, from workplace accountability to the collapse of curated personas, reveals one truth that can no longer be ignored. The world no longer rewards entitlement. It rewards value. For years, many people, especially those raised on constant validation, were told the world would adjust to their emotions, their desires, their self-image. They were promised that confidence alone equaled competence, that demanding respect was the same as earning it, and that personal discomfort was everyone else's responsibility. But reality has stepped back into the spotlight, and it has no interest in performing. Indifference is replacing accommodation. Merit is replacing identity. Reciprocity is replacing one-sided expectations. And the people who once thrived on special treatment are discovering that those privileges were temporary, dependent on youth, novelty, and cultural trends that have run their course. This isn't a gender war. It's not men versus women. It's responsibility versus avoidance, maturity versus performance, substance versus illusion. Those who are adapting, men and women alike, are rising. They're embracing growth, accountability, resilience, and genuine self-worth that doesn't crumble when the applause stops. Those who resist the shift are struggling, not because the world is cruel, but because the world is finally being honest. And honesty is the one thing entitlement cannot survive. Here is the bold truth this entire cultural moment exposes. The world owes you nothing, but it will give you everything you earn, not through demands, not through outrage, not through curated confidence, but through effort, value, contribution, and character. The special treatment era is over. The merit era has begun, and the people who embrace this reality, who choose adaptation instead of entitlement, will shape the future, while everyone else is left arguing with a world that no longer bends.